afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our next speaker is the Chief Executive of NHS England. With 1.3 million staff, our National Health Service is the largest employer in Europe. It's also one of the biggest globally, alongside Walmart and the Chinese Red Army. More importantly, the NHS consistently ranks as the most trusted and treasured institution in Britain, ahead even of the monarchy and of our armed forces, and ahead of the BBC by a country mile. And it's certainly an institution I personally have put my trust in, having had 6 children and 6 caesarean sections in NHS hospitals. But the NHS is also constantly at the centre of national debate and subject to huge stresses and strains. Simon Stevens is the man who, according to the Financial Times, was persuaded by the Prime Minister to return from America 18 months ago to run our health service, and he's here with us today. He controls over 100 billion of annual NHS spending. He's also the first NHS head to have spent a decade in the private sector, in his case, a Fortune 20 US company with businesses in 127 countries. Some say he's got the most difficult job in Britain. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Simon Stevens. Simon, thank you very much for a very thought-inspiring and provocative speech. Now, a man with your background and a man with the size of your challenge, I've got to start with the question, what keeps you awake at night? And if it's not the 30 billion funding deficit by 2020, then what is it?
Well, we have youngish kids, but they generally don't wake up at night these days, so I have to, in all honesty, tell you it's our dog who occasionally starts barking at 5 o'clock when the planes begin going over en route to Heathrow. But other than that, I sleep well.
What is your biggest challenge as the head of one of the largest organisations in the world?
The biggest challenge is to keep what works well, true to the values of the National Health Service, while nevertheless also bringing about huge change. And the change we need is, first of all, to capitalise on the fact that we are entering a new era of medicine, where we're getting much more precise about the treatments that are available. Britain is a world leader in the genomic revolution. We're funding 100,000 whole genomes, which will help us identify different treatments for cancers, for rare disease. We've got a vibrant life sciences sector. So we've got to change the way care is delivered to get more personal.
But you talk about change. How do you do that in something as big as the NHS, a system as complex as that?
Well, I think it depends on whether you believe that most of the 1.3 million staff in the health service are up for change and want to do the best, or whether you think it's something that you have to drive from on high. I believe it's the former, and I think often jobbing nurses, doctors, therapists think that they do well despite the system, not because of it. So some of what we've got to do is stop the constant administrative reorganisations, which are just a distraction of effort, and instead focus on putting the tools in hand for different parts of the country to evolve the way care works for them.
And with your new 5-year forward look, the new NHS strategy, that is the driver for this change, is it? That is a very bold strategy that you've introduced.
Yeah, we did something pretty unusual, which is rather than just rely on the political debate to set a direction for the National Health Service, we, the National Health Service, last October, came out and said, here is our consensus point of view on how care needs to evolve in this country. And we were very gratified by the fact that all of the main political parties backed that. And so I think there is now a very strong alignment in terms of the kinds of changes that are going to be required. And that is putting a lot of energy into the change agenda that we've got.
But change starts with the leader. So your decade plus abroad, mainly in the US, how are you going to bring change into the system with what you've learned abroad? What are you going to bring from those roles into the NHS here?
Well, unlike most businesses or most other sectors of the economy, the trouble with the debate that we have, not just in this country, but in most countries on healthcare, is that it is caught between two ridiculously stylized alternatives. One, those people who say our current system is rubbish and we should get shot of the whole thing, and the other who say our system is so perfect we shouldn't learn from anybody else. And so it's kind of it's a debate between two deaf opinions. And actually, most of the interesting stuff is, how do you organise a hospital better to be safer and deliver more value? How do you better integrate what the GPs and the nurses are doing? How do you deal with the fact that, on some estimates published over the weekend, a quarter of the 370 million GP appointments each year could have been done better, more productively, with better use of technology, better working between different parts of the system, more tools in the hands of patients themselves. Those are the kind of debates that we've got to get going.
And that integration you talk about, that features in your forward strategy and what's called the triple integration, where you want to integrate lots of different aspects of the health service together. But that's going to give us a very complex market. How do you regulate in a market that size without compromising safety?
Well, there were sort of a number of questions embedded there. I think our point of view is that a lot of the kind of entrepreneurship and innovation that's going to happen in healthcare, not just here but elsewhere, is going to come not just from individual silver bullets, like discovering how to do organ transplants or how to do hip replacements or how to provide retrovirals for HIV, these kind of big blockbuster therapies. Hopefully we'll have some more, but that's not where the main gains are going to come from. They're going to come from putting together technologies that spill in from outside of the health sector. You think about AI, you think about sensors technology, you think about the smartphones that each of us are carrying around in our pockets, and then just changing the way in which healthcare produces its offer to the public. So in parts of Birmingham, for example, you can now just Skype your GP, you can have a peer group discussion with other patients with your conditions without having to physically turn up to some drafty porter cabin in the health promotion department at the back of some hospital site. Healthcare's traditionally been really slow to adopt innovation. It took the Royal Navy in this country 41 years after it was discovered that limes prevented scurvy before limes were indeed issued on board ships. And that sort of 40-year lag is pretty typical and has been ever since. We've got to speed that up.
So pulling all these strands together, what you've told us and what we've discussed just now, to the theme of today's convention, which is business beyond boundaries, what message would you like to leave the directors here today?
We want the NHS to be a more permeable partner for the good stuff that is going on in the innovative private sector. We are thinking about that in various ways. We know we need a lot of house construction in this country, and so as we're building new towns, we want to make sure that the NHS is playing its part with developers and councils right at the start, thinking about how do you design digital by default ways of interacting, health promoting, congenial neighbourhoods, overcoming social isolation so people are more able to be looked after in their own homes when they get frail and elderly. We are running a big international so-called test beds programme where we're matching tech entrepreneurs, devices sector, others with parts of the NHS that want to do this kind of combinatorial innovation that I described. And the reality is that worldwide there is an enormous prospect that over the next 10, 15 years we're going to see some very profound changes in the way healthcare is delivered. Our challenge is to get ahead of that and to surf that wave, not just wait for it to wash over us.
And that's an important and very interesting lesson to leave us with. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon Stevens, Chief Executive of NHS England.